Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 9, Episode 129. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for tuning in this Friday, Steelers Nation. Dave, how you doing? You're out, you hear about this Area 51? All these people want to storm Area 51. You going to join them? You're going to go out there and catch them aliens?
No. Look, I'd like to go out there and visit that place, to be quite honest with you, though. I really would. Look, who am I to talk about it? All I know is there is intelligent life out there, much more intelligent than I am. So, whatever that is, have at it. Just leave me be is all I ask. And I got a question for you. That Steelers roller coaster opened up at Kennywood. You're headed at Kenny World. I got Disney World and Kennywood mixed up there. I know you're headed out to ride that new roller coaster, right?
Hard no for me. Me and heights don't mix too well. So I'm gonna pass on the roller coaster.
My wife loves all that. She'll jump out of perfectly good airplanes and and all like that. She absolutely loves that stuff. But it looks like a lot of the Steelers and people from the organization are checking that out today.
Yeah, so I'm sure many people will, and let us know what the ride is like. It looks really cool, though, for those that do like roller coasters. So, Dave, a couple weeks till camp coming up, getting pretty close to it, and I think it was a good time. Well, actually, before I do that, I do want to say, as we mentioned the last couple episodes, later on in the show, we do have John Eisenberg, Baltimore Ravens columnist, to talk about the Ravens, overview, their offseason, give a preview of what to expect in 2019 from Baltimore. He's also got a book that's new, The League, which I'm going to have to pick up, Dave, because it's right up my alley, talking about the early days of the NFL, the 20s, 30s, 40s, and kind of how they kept that league afloat in those early days when it was not the moneymaker that it is today. So we'll have John Eisenberg a little bit later in the show. And you read the book, right, Dave?
Yes, I have, and it's really I'd like to try to get it read again over the course of the next 2 weeks if I get a little time here. So definitely. Look, John's been a long time contributor on the show. Just amazing. You feel like you know him going back as many years as he's been on this podcast now. So if you have a chance and you're looking for some good reading material, make sure you support John and follow him on Twitter and reach out to him on Twitter and thank him, and also buy his books at Amazon.com if you have had the want to.
And from a Steelers fan's perspective, there are apparently a lot of Art Rooney stories, Art Rooney Sr. anecdotes about his involvement in the league too. So there will be definitely a Steelers influence on that book, just the way that Rooney influenced the entire league back in those early days.
Absolutely.
All right, Dave, you wrote yesterday a camp preview, which is just kind of that reminder of, wow, the season really is close to starting back up, and you kind of went through the list of things to watch for over these next 2 weeks, or whenever these 2 weeks are up, and we really get into the start of camp. You want to go through a overview of kind of what you're looking for to start a Latrobe.
Yeah, and I was wondering how long I should wait to release this or not. I probably could have got away and waited until like a day or two before training camp, but always looking for something to write about during this slow time of the off season. So I figured I'd go ahead and knock that out and get it up. Nothing overly shocking in it, I don't think. It's just more of a layout kind of things to look for right at the start of training camp, and obviously it starts with the arrivals. I don't know about you, Alex, but I'm done with the fancy cars and the fire trucks and the heavy construction equipment and the helicopters and all like that. I wouldn't mind seeing no fanfare whatsoever when it comes to arrivals this year. I think the last thing that this team needs right now is players trying to draw extra attention to themselves. So, that's obviously one. Hopefully, I'm not having to use the Google machine to Google any of these fancy cars or anything like that. I just would like to see a low-key arrival, something. Geez, do you remember the last time when we weren't talking about a tiny car or an expensive car or a helicopter or a fire truck or dump truck?
It's been a while, but honestly, I disagree. I mean, it's a minor issue to me, but I don't care. I mean, have a little fun. Camp's a grind. It's the start of the season. I'm okay with blowing off some steam and kind of making that first day enjoyable because you are setting up for the long haul. I mean, I get what you're saying, and maybe you don't want to have the Blue Angels, fly you into camp this year. But if you want to have a little fun with it and do something a little different, I'm honestly okay with it. When I look back on last season, does AB showing up in a helicopter matter at all? No, not really. Does, someone showing up in a fire truck matter at all? No. So I'm okay with these guys having a personality.
Well, get the hell off my lawn.
But I understand the sentiment because I get everything this team's been through, and you just want to make sure that focus stays on football.
I'm asking for is one training camp, Alex. I mean, just go in, put your stuff away, and go run your conditioning test. Speaking of which,
Chuck Noll out here.
Speaking of which, that's obviously going to be the next big thing. Immediately after the team reports later on that Thursday, they'll do the conditioning test. What players Tomlin deem need to run it. I'm sure there'll be a few of them that don't have to participate in that. We'll be looking for anybody that fails that conditioning test, and then not long after that, we'll be looking to see how big is the active PUP list, if any, if there's any players at all on it. I think, and it's always dangerous this time of year for me because I always want to go with what I think I know about the health of the team from all the way out here in Las Vegas and say, okay, this guy will be on PUP, this guy won't. This list will only have one player on it, two players on it, no players on it, and then lo and behold, you get a surprise, and there's like three or four players that you didn't even know about. So I'm not going to get in predicting mode as far as that goes, but if I had to guess right now or speculate, I would think Gerald Hawkins is potentially the only player likely to be placed on active PUP because he, as we found out during the offseason program, still wasn't 100% yet as he continued to recover from that torn quad that he suffered over a year ago. So along with wanting a training camp with zero grand entrances, if you will, I would like to have one training camp with zero active PUP list players on it. And just a quick reminder to everybody, for a player to qualify at any point to go on reserve PUP once the season starts, he has to be on that active PUP list at the start of training camp. If a player is not on active PUP list before he practices for the first time, then he can never go on PUP. Okay, because you'll see some people get this confused all the time. A guy will go down like the second day of practice with some sort of injury. People will say, well, just put him on PUP. It can't happen that way. Once a player begins practicing, he is no longer eligible for PUP. So the process goes active PUP first, and then once the season starts, if he still is not removed from that, he can go on reserve PUP. So just want to make that clear right there. Not long after the conditioning test and the active PUP list, or the conditioning test, Mike Tomlin will hold his annual first training camp press conference. I'm not sure how much we're going to learn other than really getting the list of maybe players that are on active PUP. I'm sure there'll be, hopefully there'll be more pressing, interesting questions, other than the whole Antonio Brown stuff and, just kind of the normal stuff that we've seen up until this point. Once again, not sure how much we're new information we're going to garner from that, but needless to say, we'll both be listening to it and pass along anything that he does say that has any importance to it. From there, once this team reports, now look, we've got 2 weeks to go. Some things could still happen. We could still see a restructure maybe between now and the start of training camp. Probably a 50-50 coin flip as far as that's concerned. If nothing does happen in that area, that'll obviously be one of the things we'll be looking for right at the start of camp, along with contract extension watch will kind of officially begin. We've already talked quite a bit on this podcast about the several potential candidates for contract extensions later on this summer. Guys like Joe Hayden, Javon Hargrave, Sean Davis, Mike Hilton, maybe even B.J. Finney. Obviously, not all of these guys are going to get contract extensions. It might only be one or two of them. And as far as the restructure goes, Cameron Hayward probably leads the list as potential candidates, but you also have guys, a few other guys maybe in, DeCastro or Villanueva, maybe, some other guys, have the ability to have their contracts restructured as well. This team right now sits at almost $985,000 under the cap, and that's obviously not a lot of room. Something's going to happen with probably an extension or two and probably a restructure or two. And that watch will begin here in a little less than 2 weeks. We'll also be looking to see if Mike Tomlin gets a contract extension here. Back in 2017, I think his last contract extension was announced like a week into training camp, and then later on, I think at the end of August, was when Kevin Colbert received his contract extension. So, look, I don't know what you think about the chances of this happening, Alex. I think there's a good chance that both Tomlin and Colbert get extensions between now and the start of the regular season. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I generally agree. I mean, I don't get too really caught up in the debate. I see the stuff in the national media, or at least the Pittsburgh, bigger media. Should Tomlin deserve an extension? Should he get an extension? I mean, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, these things are worth even less than a player contracts. Coach sign extension. If something doesn't work out, you can always move on. Not saying that will happen. Obviously, in Pittsburgh, it's really rare for that to happen, but it doesn't move the needle a whole lot for me. But short answer, yes, I expect Tomlin and Colbert to sign extensions.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen as well. I think you'll probably hear about Tomlin first, and I think they'll spread it out again. I think you'll hear it because Colbert's contract, by the way, expires after the 2020 draft, according to reports. So you would think. Look, I don't think there's any reason not to think that that's going to happen. Now, whether or not people agree with that, I'm sure. Right. I'm sure people would. There's a large group of our listeners that don't think either one of them should get extensions. I'm fine with it personally, with both of them.
I do think the Colbert's extension may be the last one that he signs, because he has maybe hinted at retirement, and he might decide, let's go one more extension. That'll probably take you to the end of Ben's career, and once Ben's career is over, he might be over too.
Yeah, I think Ben, Tomlin, and Colbert are all tied together.
I don't think Tomlin is nearly as tied to Ben and Colbert the way that the Colbert is to Ben.
I just view Tomlin maybe because of his kid getting in through college and all like that. Maybe, look, I mean, he's by the time, how many years has he already been with the Steelers, and how many will he have been with the Steelers by the time, after the next 3 years is up? I mean, that's a long time,
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, could there be a chance, that Tomlin, his kid going to college? I mean, usually coaches might leave if they're in high school and you want to watch them in high school. If you're in college, I mean, yeah, you can go watch them play college, but you're not going to be as involved in their life. And maybe Tomlin says, if his son gets close to the NFL, maybe that's what he wants to wait for. So I know Tomlin's been around for a long time, but he's younger. He's a football dude through and through, and I don't see him being tied to the hip the way that Colbert might be to Ben.
All right, we got plenty more time to talk about that. Rounding out kind of the things to look for, obviously the first practice will take place 2 weeks from today, right? And that'll be your first trip out there to Latrobe, St. Vincent College, and you'll be reporting on that. The first padded practice of training camp is the following that Sunday, a couple of days after there, and as usual, you'll be out there or plan to be out there for every training camp practice, and then report the details back to us. And then those daily diaries most of them will be followed up with a special edition of the Terrible Podcast.
Yep, and then you will also have the Hall of Honor announced on the 27th, I believe, the new class.
Absolutely, and I forgot to put that in there. Good point.
So the only point I wanted to make with the active pup, I hope Hawkins avoids it. I think that he will, just because, we want to let him get some work in right away. Now, he may not be in team drills right away. I could see them holding him out of that early on the first week or so, but I think you could at least let him practice and go through some individual sessions and just stay in conditioning and kind of just be able to ready to make that quick transition. So I think that Hawkins is going to avoid it. If I had to guess, it's obviously just a guess, but I think that they may limit him the early portion of camp.
I hope he avoids it too, because I think he needs every bit of. I think he needs all of it to increase his chances.
Because he practiced in OTAs, right? That was the general feel we got. He participated, correct?
Right, but we don't know. Obviously, we don't know to what degree.
Yeah, well, it felt like he was in team drills because they were talking about him playing at guard. So I feel like he got the majority of work in OTAs. But when you go into team drills in camp, you may want to take him out and let him have an extra week. But at least so you keep him active so he can go through practice and individual drills and do some of the team stuff.
So do you think we're going to have an empty PUP list? How great would that be?
It'd be awesome. Now, I mean, there's always that surprise. Somebody gets hurt over these last 6 weeks working out. I mean, somebody could pop up that we have no idea about. But the team looks really healthy right now, so that's as good of a place as you can possibly be.
Well, that Devin Bush is getting after it, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, and you got Juju and James Conner. You've been following those guys pretty closely. Everyone's working really hard.
Absolutely.
All right, Dave, that was the camp preview, and let's go to what did I have next here? You had an article yesterday, because ESPN, I think Matt Bowen, who's one of my favorite football writers, Matthew Bowen, talking about kind of what are some of teams' most favorite and effective personnel groupings. And for Pittsburgh, they're a base 11 personnel team, but they actually used two groupings more and more effectively than some other teams. That's 22 personnel, so 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, and 0 personnel, 00 personnel, which is basically just 5 wide, which I wrote about a couple weeks ago. So, Dave, you wanted to go through that study. I know there's a really interesting point you wanted to hit on in regards to 22 personnel.
First of all, we're going to be able to kill so much time thanks to this piece by Matt Bowen. My eyes lit up when I read it originally and started writing about it. Thank goodness we're going to have something to really dive deep into and talk about on the Friday podcast here. And this is it. And first and foremost, I'm with you, Matt Bowen. If you're not following him on Twitter, and if you don't watch those videos, and what do they call that show now that they do on the weekends with him that airs like at 3:00 in the morning?
NFL Matchup.
Yeah, NFL Matchup. That thing, that show should be 2 hours long, and it still wouldn't be long enough, in my opinion. So yeah,
it just shouldn't be at 3 a.m. Put it in a time slot people will watch.
Yeah, and don't only make what is it now? Is it a half hour or an hour?
I think it's a half hour. I want to say it's a half hour.
I want to say it's a half hour too, but it's not long enough. I tell you that, and really enjoy Matt Bowen's stuff. However, he wrote about basically the overview of the article was about different personnel groupings used during the 2018 season by NFL teams, who used it the most, and which teams excelled in each of them. And he went on to in that post, Pittsburgh Steelers were obviously mentioned twice, as you mentioned, talking about how they utilize both the 00 personnel groupings, which is 5 wide receivers, and the 22 personnel groupings, which is essentially 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, and how they also perform well by using both of those. Now, he laid that out, but as they like to say, the devil is in the details, right? Now I'm gonna. Excuse me, my earphone came off there. I'm gonna tell you what Matt Bowen wrote about each, and I'm gonna add a little bit to it there, and you can interject into that, any time that you want there. First of all, talking about the 5 wide, he says they were one of 2 teams to use the 5 wide receiver look in 2018, running 32 snaps and completing 24 of 30 pass attempts during that. The only other team to run 5 wide, the Buffalo Bills, with 4 snaps. So that alone made them, it was an easy win. they were the only team doing it. And he says the team that ran it best, he obviously says Pittsburgh is the easy choice, and the pass yards per attempt tell the story, with the Steelers averaging 6.7 yards per attempt. That tells us the ball was coming out quickly. We already know the ball was coming out quickly with Ben anyway from the snap to throw time that he had last year. Was, I think, the second quickest in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus. But let's get now into the kind of the devil in the details here. Well, one thing that Matt Bowen doesn't tell you, that, boy, Matthew Marksy, it was a joy to pick up his charting from last year and just go right to that stuff and find some of the these deeper details out. Here's the thing. We have them down. I think Bowen had them down for running 32 plays out of 5 wide. We had them down for running 31. Okay, not a big difference there. That doesn't matter here. But here's the thing. He also had Roethlisberger down as going 24-29 for 202 yards with 1 touchdown. That equates to a 6.97 yards per pass attempt, slightly higher than what Bowen has there. And look, we're talking about 1 play difference here, so don't get caught up in that. Additionally, 20 of those completions that Roethlisberger had of the 24 resulted in successful plays, as you would probably expect them to do. Here's the one thing that Matt Bowens did not reference in his Wednesday post, however, and it's that the majority of those 5-wide personnel grouping plays last season came in 2 games in the Steelers' Week 15 and Week 16 games against the New England Patriots and New Orleans Saints. In fact, 28 of the 31 plays that we charted that used the Steelers, in 00 personnel came in the games against those 2 teams. I think one other one came in whatever week it was, the week before against the Denver Broncos, and then obviously the finale. I think there were 3 or 4 plays that they utilized it that way in that game as well too. Now keep in mind that wide receiver Eli Rogers didn't get removed from the reserve PUP list until week 15, and he was on the field for 30 of those 31 plays. So I guess the question then becomes, I think it's important to point out that they only, that basically all those snaps were used in just 2 games. B, would they have used it more had Eli Rogers been healthy all year?
Yes, absolutely. It's not a coincidence that they didn't start using this until Eli came back and was healthy. So that's why I wrote about it the other day. That's what I said. And then that's why I think that they're still going to use it again this year, because everyone's going to be healthy and they're going to take advantage of the wide receiver depth that they have.
And especially if they carry 6 total wide receiver. I mean,
regardless. Which I think is a safe. Maybe I shouldn't call it a safe bet. I think the odds are good that they do that.
All right, so guesstimate for me, assuming let's say they carry 6, okay, 6 wide receivers in total, and it's the 6 that we think that it'll be, meaning Switzer and Eli Rogers both make it. How many? What do you see as kind of the total snap count potentially for 5 wide receivers 00 personnel group in 2019?
And they had 31 or 32 last year.
31 or 32. Are they going to triple that? Are we going to be talking about 100? What's 100 divided by 16? 6?
Something like that. I mean, there's always going to be a limit. 16.7. So 16 a game. Or no, I'm sorry. I have my math wrong. Yep, you're right. 6.25.
Am I going to take my shoes off?
I'm being dumb, which is par for the course. I think it's a game plan specific thing. I think it's a situational thing. It's not something that you're going to have every single week, but it's something that you're going to take advantage of. And for all the reasons that I wrote a couple weeks ago, and I think we talked about it on the podcast about the advantages that gives you, spreading the field out horizontally and vertically, forcing safeties to cover wide receivers, or maybe even a linebacker to cover a receiver. No team has 5 corners out there. Depth can be thin. So to put a number on it's really difficult to do because I think it can fluctuate. But I think 75 to 100. I mean, knowing that in some games you might do it 15 times, in some games you might not do it at all, I think you could see somewhere in that range.
More, or let's see, against the Patriots in the opener. They did it against the Patriots last year. Are we going to see that at least 15 times?
I mean, again, to put an exact number is going to be tough. I think you're going to see it. Maybe 15's pushing it a little too much. Again, it's if they're down, could be. If you get a 2-minute situation, could be more. I'd say around 10, 5 to 10 is where I would go safely with that week 1 opener.
Okay, I'm with you. I think I think the total number will be larger than 31, 32.
I think that's safe to say.
I'm not so sure it'll reach the 100 mark, but I think it could at least. I think it could get to possibly tripling that mark. 90 right around in there. So it's just interesting that and as you said, all of that kind of coincided, as the stats point out, when Eli Rogers returned. So that's something to watch for. Definitely at the start of the season, will they use more 5 wide receivers groupings, and will they use it throughout the season, or will it be more game plan specific? In 2019. Now, moving on to the 22 personnel, there's a little bit different in the numbers here, and I think I know where our differences are with what Bowen's numbers are. First of all, he says the Los Angeles Chargers tied with the Pittsburgh Steelers with 90 snaps out of 22 personnel. Looking at the Chargers with fullback Derek Watt in the game to dig out daylight for Melvin Gordon. The LA running back checked in at 4th in the NFL with 5.3 yards per carry on 27 attempts out of 22 sets. He goes on to say the team that ran it best. It's close here with the Chargers, Steelers, and New Orleans Saints. As all 3 teams had the ability to run downhill while using the pass game out of 22 personnel. But I'll go with the Steelers, for whom running back James Conner led the league with 43 rush attempts, and quarterback Ben Roethlisberger completed 15 of a league-high 19 pass attempts out of 22 personnel on the field. Now, a deeper examination of what Matthew Marquis charted for us last year shows us that the Steelers ran 78 offensive plays out of 22 personnel, and you're probably listening, saying, well, how the heck are you got 78 and Matt Bowen has 90? Well, I have a feeling he just looked at the overall NFL sheet of personnel groupings and did not look at the actual formations and all like that. We have the Steelers down of running 90 total out of 22. However, 12 of those plays were victory formation. So you got to throw those out because all of those were kneel downs. And I forget what the total count. I think DHB was the one wide receiver on the field for like 7 of those plays. And I think Justin Hunter was on the field for 1 or 2. I think Eli was on the field for 1, somewhere along those lines. So that's the differential A from 90 to the 78 that we have there. Now, moving on from that, where did I pick up off here? We have the Steelers running the football on 58 of those 78 plays. Not surprising, right? I mean, you would expect them to run more out of 22 personnel than you would pass more. 2 of those 58 plays were quarterback sneaks by Ben Roethlisberger. We also have James Conner down for running the football on 47 plays for 241 yards and one touchdown last season out of 22 personnel. A nice robust average of 5.1 yards per carry. But man, we got to get away from yards per carry. We just got to get away from that, because run success rates is a much better stat to use. And only 22 of those 47 plays, 46.8% of those 47 runs that Conner had were successful runs. Not awful, but obviously you'd like to see that successful run rate, regardless of what formation that you run out of, be as close to 50% as possible. That's when you know that you're near the top of the league of running the football. We've talked several times already this offseason, Alex, you and I, about, man, the Steelers don't necessarily have to run the ball more in 2019. They just have to run the football better. Now, we also have Roethlisberger down as completing 16 of his 20 total pass attempts out of 22 personnel for 168 yards with no touchdowns and 1 interception. 16 of those plays featured 2 true tight ends being on the field. What I mean by true tight ends is just that. Both those tight ends were actually tight ends. Not one of them being an offensive lineman serving as a tight end. This is where it starts getting interesting when you dig deeper into these numbers, Alex. Something else to keep in mind last season in regard to the Steelers' heavy usage of 22 personnel is the fact that 43 of the 78 total plays that they ran out of 22 personnel included Chukwuma Okorafor being on the field, essentially playing one of the 2 tight end positions. The Steelers ran the football on 39 of those 43 plays that Okorafor was on the field for. Roethlisberger was 2 of 4 on the other 4 passing plays that took place when he was on the field. Now, and you and I talked very briefly about this before we got on the show. I can't remember discussing this, and it ended up being kind of a revelation to me going through the charting yesterday on this. The heavy usage of 22 personnel in 2018 did not include really Vance McDonald. He was on the field for just 5 of those 78 total plays. McDonald is, and back me up on this or disagree if you want. Vance McDonald is not an awful blocker, and thus it'd be interesting to know why he wasn't on the field more when 22 personnel was used last season.
Who was replacing him typically? Is it a Okorafor or is it Grimble? Or James was obviously on the field, but who's the second tight end?
Well, it was obviously what, Grimble or Okorafor.
Well, I'm saying, do you know how was it Okorafor more often than Grimble? Because Okorafor had 30.
Okorafor had 43 of the 78 total plays.
How many did Grimble have?
I don't know, but it was up there. I mean, him and Jesse were it was usually Jesse and Okorafor or Jesse and Grimble.
Okay. Well, if it's 43 of Okorafor and there are 78 of these overall, then Grimble's got like 35 or something, I think. So, okay, so pretty even split. I mean, if you have Okorafor out there, obviously you're getting a much better run blocker, so I can understand that. I mean, I'm not too mad about it. I think that, McDonald's not a bad run blocker, but I think he's very comparable to Grimble and Jesse. And look at what McDonald played last year. He played 50% of the snaps. He didn't play, a ton of snaps, only missed one game. So I'm not surprised that he wasn't out there for some situations because he only played half the total snaps last year. And I think if you look at a chance to maybe rest him, you get another decent blocker on the field. And then even doing little things like maybe you reduce the risk of an injury by those kind of big car crash situations in the run game like that. So I'm not particularly bothered by it. I don't know if you are, but I'm not.
I am bothered. I mean, I've talked about 22 personnel for a number of years now. How much I don't mind it, especially when two true tight ends are on the field. When Okorafor is on the field, what's the offense going to do?
Yeah, they're going to run the football, but they still ran the football the majority of the time, whether it was a tight end or a tackle on the field.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but the fact of the matter is it gives you more flexibility to change the play, also depending on the type of personnel that you face. And I don't view McDonald as being a huge step backwards in the blocking department, especially based on that first season.
No, but Okorafor is a big step forward. Then
right, but you're not going to pass though. I mean, you have
Sure.
zero. I mean, you're taking one of your weapons off the field in that situation. I'm going to sort this real quick. So
they did throw a little bit, but if you're facing, and I'm curious, I don't know the answer. I could be wrong on this, but did Okorafor play more against 4-3 defenses? Because in those situations, I want my tackle on a 4-3 end instead of my tight end. That's a worse matchup for a tight end in general. If it's a tight end versus a 3-4 outside linebacker, it's a little better because of the size matchup. But you can definitely see the benefit of having a tackle out there in those particular moments, especially if it's third and short.
Let's see. Grimble, wow. Grimble was on the field quite a bit in those situations.
I'm guessing 35.
Hold on here, and I'll try to get you a number on that. But I mean, he really was used a lot in.
And he's improved a lot as a blocker. I mean, I kind of put Grimble and Jesse and Vance kind of all in the same boat in terms of run blocking. Decent.
74 times? Can that be right?
Of the 78 in 22 personnel? There's some unless Jesse just didn't play. What did Jesse play then? But that number doesn't sound right.
That doesn't sound right at all for some reason here.
Because we're running out of guys here. 22 personnel. Okorafor's got 43. Jesse's got some. Grimble's got 70.
That's 22 personnel sorted there. Let's see how many Jesse had. And unsort that.
Do you think Jesse would be playing a lot?
I have Jesse down for 37 snaps.
Okay, I'm kind of confused at this point, trying to figure out how Grimble has 74, Okorafor has 43, Jesse has 37.
So basically, it was Grimble. Grimble was predominantly used in 22 as one of the two tight ends. That's what it's telling us.
And then Jesse and Okorafor split the others, basically.
Basically, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Grimble's improved a lot as a blocker his last 2 seasons, so I'm not particularly mad about that. And again, McDonald played half the snaps last year, so there's going to be big chunks of the game where he's not on the field. And I think that's generally going to be the trend this year, where he may play a little more because Jesse's not there, but they want to keep this guy healthy. They want to make sure he's involved in every game. He's not going to be overworked and overloaded and end up missing half the season. That's really going to hurt and impact the offense. So if you have a situation where you say, yeah, McDonald's decent at this, but we have another guy in Grimble or Core 4 that can kind of give us the same thing, then let's take the opportunity to get McDonald a breather and get him off the field.
I think it just ties your hands a little bit too much when it comes to, look, I mean, there's some situations and some short yardage situations where you're going to say we're going to just lace them up and we need we need the 3 yards and we're going to get it here. I definitely understand that.
Go check a Core 4 snaps, my last question for you, and see how many of those came against, or just give me the teams that he was playing those snaps against, because I want to know how many 4-3 defenses he faced.
All right,
when a Core 4 was on
as a tight end, first of all, how many total snaps did I tell you he?
43.
Let me just double check that number real quick here for you.
That
was 43. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the teams that he lined up at tight end against. Week 1, Cleveland.
Okay.
Quite a few snaps. Let's see, 10. Maybe, 5, 10, maybe 15 snaps there. 1 against KC.
Okay. 3-14.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, 4-3 defense. That makes sense.
1, 2, 3, 4 against Atlanta.
Yeah, another 4-3 defense.
3 against Cincinnati.
Yep, 4-3.
Another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against Cleveland.
Yeah, again, kind of 4-3, kind of hybrid. It makes sense.
1 against Carolina.
4-3.
2 against Jacksonville.
4-3.
1 against Oakland.
I think Oakland's a 4-3. I don't know. They've been kind of weird.
New Orleans 2.
And they were also a 4-3. Is that all of them?
That's all of them. So no snaps in. Let's see, who was.
So none against Baltimore, for example.
None against Baltimore.
Yeah. So predominantly 4-3 defenses, and that's why you put it. Because that's the challenge when you're facing a Carolina or a Cincinnati or an Atlanta, Tampa Bay. You're facing these 4-3 defense ends that are bigger, stronger, and are playing right up on the line of scrimmage. And that's the benefit of having the tackle in to take him instead of a tight end who's going to be at a size mismatch. I'm curious what the run success rate was with a Core 4 on the field. I thought that he would be the sole arbiter of pass or fail, but I'm curious how that compares to the overall number or when he wasn't on the field.
Let's see here. Thankfully, I can sort that real quick.
Yeah, I lied. I said I wouldn't ask another question, but I did. But that's the benefit. And like I said, I'm okay with that. And again, I don't – because you're not expecting – well, I'll ask you after you're done searching stuff. But I don't expect Vance to play 80% of the snaps this year. I mean, I know Jesse's not going to be there, but he's just not going to play that much. They want to make sure they get Vance through this whole season. And that may be doing different things like running 4 and 5 wide receiver sets, just not having a second tight end on the field. But Vance is a guy that played 15 games last year, and he still played 50% of the snaps. So I'm not surprised that he was taken out in some of these situations.
17 successful runs on 39 total runs with a Core 4 as one of your tight ends.
Yeah, not a great percentage on that, 43.6. That's at about the average of the overall. You say it was about 45%.
It was actually a little bit higher success rate.
Yeah. Isn't like 45% overall was the success rate?
Yeah, something like that. I don't have the exact total.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, is that all on a Core 4? Probably not. I mean, you'd have to really look into the tape on those. But I understand why Core 4 is out there, and I get the value of that. So that really doesn't bother me.
All right, so should we expect the same thing with McDonald again?
Yeah, like I said, I'll ask you the question I was going to ask a second ago. What percentage of snaps do you think Vance is playing in 2019? Let's just assume good health. Assume he plays all 16 games. What's the percentage of snaps he would play?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, we already talked about you're going to have probably, let's say 100 snaps with 5 wides, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever.
That's 10%. That's 10% right off the top there.
Let's assume 1,000 offensive snaps just to make it a real clean, easy number.
I would say, I mean, they like to run a lot of 11. 70%?
See, I don't think it's going to be that high. He was like 55% last year. And I think that they're going to be careful with him. I can't. I know that Jesse's not there. I know that's going to be the counter argument, but I think they want to manage his reps.
Is 55% a good over/under number to go with then?
Maybe 60. I think if most people see 55, they would take the over. I think 60 makes it a little more interesting. I think it's going to be in that 55 to 60% range.
Well, what would you, if we set it at 60% of total offensive snaps for Vance McDonald, assuming that he stays healthy, are you taking the over or the under?
I may take the over, but it'd be slightly. I mean, I think he'll play 615 snaps this year if you put the 1,000 as your baseline.
You don't think he'd make 65? So you think the number would come in maybe between 60 and 65%?
Yeah, I think anywhere from 55 to 65. I think, short answer, it'll be right around 60% is where I'm expecting him to come in at, because I think they don't want him to be – because if you ask them to play every single snap, you're increasing the risk of wear and tear and injury, and you can't lose Vance. If you lose Vance, his offense really goes into a tough place because there's still talent, but the dynamic element he gives you in that middle of the field, and then Juju gets even more attention. I mean, you just can't lose McDonald. Am I right about that?
Oh, no, you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, but here's the thing. I'm not asking to replace all those Okorafor snaps with McDonald, but, I mean, come on. 20 extra,
Well, again, when you see that they're mostly against 4-3 defenses, I get that principle because Tomlin's talked about that before. That's why you see Okorafor play a lot against Cincinnati.
If we're talking about a 50% run success rate with Okorafor on the field, that's one thing, but we're not.
Well, is the run success rate all on Okorafor for it not working? I probably not. It's hard to see that. I mean, he is on the far end, and if they're running a dive up the middle, then it may not matter as much.
I'm just saying his ability to, you can leave that defender down low too, knowing that tackle ain't going out for a pass either.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not. You still got some weapons out there. Tight ends block. Okorafor can block on pass plays. Maybe it's fair to say that they should pass a little bit more with Okorafor in the game to help break up that tendency. I mean, that may be a fair self-scout kind of thing, but I get the principle, and I'm not particularly bothered by it.
All right, we'll see if they look. I mean, this team lost Jesse James during the offseason, and we just determined it was still Grimble that played.
I can't believe Grimble played that much.
Isn't that amazing? Would you have guessed that?
How many snaps did he play? What was his total snap count last year? I'm gonna look that. I won't make you do the work. I'm gonna look that up.
I need a raise.
Because he played 74 in those snaps, and I mean he played he played more. He played maybe 150 snaps, 200 snaps last year.
And then let me just point out
174.
174. So let's see.
100 non-22 personnel snaps.
Okay, there you go. And I should point out, too, that Roosevelt Nix was on the field as the other running back for all these 22 personnel snaps. Now, we've heard, get James Conner, Jalen Samuels on the field in some 21 or 22 looks. I know that's going to be the hot topic. And I think it'll be more than last year, which was 0 of two running backs, true running backs on the field. But I mean, I'm not buying all this hype. I think it could hit 15 maybe, but man, I'd be surprised if you get guys, two true running backs on the field together more than. I'll give you 19 snaps as a max high to make everybody happy, but I just can't see it happening, that many times.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
And by the way, Eddie Faulkner retweeted.
Oh, really?
Retweeted that ESPN article. I don't know if that's just trying to pull a fake there or whatnot, and make everybody think that they're going to try to give somebody else something, give the Patriots something to think about there. But he did retweet that ESPN article, and how that's all of a sudden news and made it back into the news cycle this week when it was said 3 weeks ago. I don't know, but I talked a few years ago, back when they had D'Angelo Williams and Le'Veon Bell. Boy, it'd be nice to see something along those lines with a pony backfield. We never saw it. If we didn't see it then, and I know some coaches and offensive coordinator changes and all like that, I just don't see how you're going to be able to do that, more than say 15 or so times this year.
Maybe it does happen, but with your second-year offensive coordinator and a new running backs coach, but it's kind of a boy who cried wolf situation where it's like every year you hear about it from, Connor and Bell and Connor's rookie year, and like you said, Bell and Dewell, and then you had Redmond and Rainey from years ago, or Mendenhall and whatever. I mean, it was talked about then, and it just hasn't happened. So could it happen in one particular game? Sure. I don't think it's something that you're going to see very often.
All right, was that deeper dive worth it then into those personnel groupings? We found out that really 2 games they used the five wide receivers, and nobody talked about the McDonald, the limited usage of McDonald, the heavy usage of Grimble in those situations, and really the heavy usage of Okorafor.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I think I didn't know that about the 22 personnel, so I think that's interesting to know and something to watch and go through our charting next year. With the 5 wide stuff, I wrote about that last week, so I kind of already had an idea on that. But they gave us something to talk about.
Yeah, and it's, don't get. I see one. I'm not going to name the paper, but he tried to write an article based off of the stats that Matt Bowen gave, and you can tell that he didn't have the exact snap counts of who played who. It's so hard to. I guess what I'm getting at is everything needs to be contextualized, and there's no reason for everything not to be contextualized now in the digital age that we live in and all now. So you got to be careful when just getting thrown a large group of stats like this. You have to dig deeper into them, and thankfully you and Matthew do such a great job charting. And I'm gonna ask you guys to do even a few more things in your charting this year as well too, to make my job easier.
I break out in a cold sweat every time I hear charting. It's a love-hate relationship with those charts, but when it's the off season or when you need to go back and find something, those things are worth their weight in gold. They
really are. Yeah, I think we utilize them more, later on in the season and then in the off season than we do during the season. Maybe we'll try to use them a little bit more in season this year.
Yeah, for sure. Dave, before we get to John Eisenberg, I just want to talk about an interview that we did this past week. We talked to Steelers outside linebacker Ola Adeyene. Had a chance to interview him, which I appreciated him taking the time to speak with me. You can see the interview on Steelers Depot. That was posted yesterday morning, so you can just type it in the search bar, but it got a pretty good response. Nothing too crazy, groundbreaking that he said in the interview. He almost didn't become a Steeler. He was going to sign with some other 3-4 team. Pittsburgh called him last second, made an offer. Wasn't the most money. Philadelphia offered the most money, but he didn't want to go to the Eagles, did not want to play in a 4-3, and he told me that just playing, having the chance to go to Pittsburgh and play in a 3-4, he really liked Joey Porter, really kind of sealed the deal for him. So, interesting story of how he became a Steeler and how it almost didn't happen.
Yeah, he talked a little bit about Danny Smith and some special teams too, didn't he?
Yep, we know that's the big thing on the docket. He's aware of that to make this team, it's going to be through special teams. And while, we've seen what he can do as a pass rusher, and there's hopefully he could carve out a role there should he make the team, he's still going to have to work on special teams. So he said he's talked to Danny Smith this offseason, knows it's something he's really got to commit to. It's something he didn't really do at Toledo, as is the case for most defensive guys, because they're the big man on campus. They're playing defense. They don't have to worry about covering kicks and punts. But he says his first camp was a lot tougher special teams-wise. He told me, quote, special teams-wise, it was a lot tougher than the actual defense because I pride myself on being a really smart guy. I locked in on plays, but special teams-wise, I think it was harder. I think what was the harder part for me to get through training camp. I tried to prepare myself for that, but there's only so much you can do until you get there and see what it is. I think that's the bigger adjustment for me. So no doubt about that. That's the thing I've talked about. We know he can get after the quarterback. We know he can set a physical edge in the run game. Can he drop into coverage? And can he cover on special teams? Those are the big question marks he's got to answer.
Well, this one guy, I know you and several listeners do as well, but can't wait to watch this guy during the preseason here. I mean, they really should have a strong preseason, and obviously we'll be watching his work on special teams as well. But man, it'd be so nice to get this guy, to be a potentially maybe a starter down the road.
Yeah, and that door could open next year if Dupree's not brought back. So again, just want to plug that interview briefly. And speaking of interviews, Dave, I think now is a good time to go talk to our buddy John Eisenberg, who covers the Ravens, and we'll be back in a second to recap that interview.
Okay, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. It is Friday. It is a little less than 2 weeks until the start of training camp, and we are winding down now our look around the AFC North at the other teams in the Steelers division there, getting an idea of what all transpired this past offseason and the outlook for the 2019 season. And after already talking and discussing the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals, we saved the best for last, and that, of course, is our good buddy John Eisenberg, who covers the Baltimore Ravens for BaltimoreRavens.com. John also has written several great football and baseball books over the years. His latest is a must-read. It is called The League. And John, I really enjoyed that book, and welcome back to the Terrible Podcast.
Well, it's my pleasure to be back on with you guys, and thank you. Thank you for that nice plug, and about ready for another season here.
You got any more? You working on any more books coming up real quick, or over the next calendar year here?
Not at the moment, no. I'm going to be, with this being the 100th season of the NFL and all coming up, there's a lot of attention sort of on where the league began, and that is all covered in my book, The League. It's really the story. How the league got started. So there's going to be a lot of attention on that book this fall. So I'm just going to keep rolling with that one here for a little while.
All right. And as always, make sure you can go to Amazon.com. It is probably one of the easiest ways to look at John Eisenberg's books online and purchase them that way. And also you can follow John on Twitter, and you should already be doing that at @BMoreEisenberg. And John, let's start with the Ravens. Busy offseason for them, obviously. Joe Flacco is now with the Denver Broncos. They had a very intriguing draft. Several guys that Alex and I thought highly of, too, thought that could potentially be Steelers on top of it. So, let's start with kind of a 30,000 foot look at what the Ravens did this offseason here.
Well, it's been tumultuous. Tumultuous is not a word I would use, but there's been a fair amount of change, certainly on defense. Just a lot of familiar names are gone. Terrell Suggs left the Ravens after 16 years. He signed with the Arizona Cardinals, probably one more year left in the tank for Suggs. Eric Weddle, who has sort of run their secondary, Ravens let him go pretty much, and he signed with the LA Rams. Zadarius Smith, who was their best pass rusher last year, signed a big contract, really big, with the Green Bay Packers that the Ravens didn't want to match. So, and C.J. Mosley, he was their best defensive player and a Pro Bowl linebacker, drafted, a homegrown guy, signs with the New York Jets, barrier-busting contract there. That's just a lot of star power gone from the defense. So that is a side of the ball where there's a fair amount of change and some new guys stepping in, and it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, they went out and immediately signed Earl Thomas, just, an outstanding blue-chip player to solidify that secondary. And so we'll see what happens on that side of the ball with the Ravens. They've lost a lot of star power. They've gotten younger and faster on that side of the ball. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. That's 30,000 feet on defense. On offense, of course, now, as you mentioned, Joe Flacco's gone. It's the Lamar Jackson offense now. It's going to look completely different than it did for the last 10 years. Look a lot more like it did at the end of last year with Lamar running around and bringing what he brings to the table. They have to work on the passing game, and as a result, that's what they drafted wide receivers in the first round and the third round. They've never done that before. I think they've been watching the Steelers a little bit and seen all those playmakers coming in, and they needed some. There was a lack of playmakers on that side of the ball surrounding Lamar. So they got Hollywood Brown from Oklahoma in the first round, Miles Boykin from Notre Dame in the third round, and they brought in Mark Ingram as a running back, and so it's just a completely different looking offense now. So a lot of question marks, but a very interesting team, that's for sure.
When one of the biggest things that stuck out to me, obviously, and you hit on this, was all the movement on the defensive side of the football for them. And I contend that, look, I was a big Eric Weddle fan. I thought what he did in that defense was absolutely amazing. Now, that defense was great last year, minus the ability to take the football away. And boy, Steeler fans can relate to that. They just had a problem of getting the interceptions there. But that withstanding, that Ravens defense was good. They disguised a lot of stuff, and I understand that a guy in Earl Thomas is an accomplished guy, but the guys that they lost up front, And look, that secondary, I think, as a whole, will be fine there with the Ravens. But the linebackers and moving up forward to that defensive front, obviously they got those two big pluggers still in the middle there. But man, I just can't. I just don't see how this defense doesn't take a step backwards this year. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a very fair assessment, I think, and I think they're going to rely more on scheme than maybe talent a little bit. And they have a real strong defensive coordinator. Wink Martindale had an excellent first year. He's very creative. There's a lot of disguising going on. And I think they're hoping that, that they can make up for some of that with being surprising and being unpredictable. And certainly was the case last year. So that's what they're hoping for. But, yeah, I mean, there's no way not to. The biggest question mark to me is the pass rush. Obviously, they lost Suggs, Darius Smith. That was the bulk of their pass rush. And so, they brought in they brought in a couple of veterans, Shane Ray from Denver, who's actually a young guy that's had some decent success at Denver before, but not recently. He's had a lot of injuries, and they're just hoping for lightning in a bottle there. And Pernell McPhee, they're bringing back for some interior pass rush, and maybe he can provide that. But those two guys between them only had one sack last year. And so I don't know what you can expect. Tim Williams, is a recent draft pick who has never materialized, plenty of talent. So big question is the pass rush to me. Where are they going to get that? I think they're going to be able to stop the run pretty well. The Ravens always do that. As you mentioned, they have Michael Pierce and Brandon Williams up front, and that anchors the defense pretty well. They have some run stoppers. They've developed guys like Chris Wormley, and there's always bodies able to do that for the Ravens. But the big question to me is going to be that pass rush.
Jimmy Smith, believe it or not, turns 31, I think, at the end of this month. Where is the time gone with that? It just seems like yesterday he was being drafted by the Ravens there. He's obviously missed so many games. I think the last 3 seasons there. When healthy, though, he seems to be a solid cornerback. Where do you think he is at right now in his career? And are there has to be concerns that whether or not he can stay healthy again in 2019, something I don't think he's played a full season since like 2015.
Well, here's what's interesting. They made a decision to bring him back. He's their highest paid player this year, big cap number, and they could have cut him. They could have cut him. I mean, they made him a cap casualty. They have Marlon Humphrey. They have Brandon Carr. They could have rolled him out as the outside corners easily. But they decided to keep Jimmy with that big cap number, which is a little surprising to some people. But here's the deal. Last year, the games he missed last year, he was suspended at the beginning of the season. And he missed the first quarter of the season. Once he came back, he was pretty healthy. And he played better and better as the year went on. And what they do is they rotate those 3 guys. They give them all time off, significant time off, which is a little surprising, for a guy like Marlon Humphrey who's really developing. But Jimmy, he is in the last year of his contract. I don't know whether there'll be another one. We'll just have to see for all the reasons you mentioned and others. But he played pretty good football at the end of last year, and he stayed healthy. So I think they're thinking with less snaps and a blend of 3 guys on those outside corners, he'll stay healthy, and he's very solid if he's healthy and out there. So I think they're going to roll with what they went with last year and see if it works, because it was a real strength. And I think they're just going to see if they can replicate that.
John, you mentioned obviously 3 big names that the defense lost this year: Suggs, Weddle, and Mosley. From an on-field standpoint, those are pretty big losses that will have to be replaced. But I'm curious from a leadership standpoint how that's going to get replaced on defense. And then the offense, too. I guess my question basically is, who are the leaders of this team? Because last year I would have thought it was those 3 guys, Suggs, Mosley, and Weddle, and I don't know who it is right now.
Yeah, that's very much in play. Earl Thomas is new to this team, so he would be a guy they could bring in as a leader. I think Peanut Onwuasor, is one that's replacing Mosley. He's one of these classic Ravens undrafted free agent linebackers who's developing into a pretty good player. He had a second-round tender put on him this year, and I think you're looking at a guy there that may be emerging. He's going to replace Mosley. And, I mean, he's not as good a player as Mosley, at least at this point, but he can be a leader. We'll look to Earl Thomas, I think, to that. And, there's not, I mean, Suggs, it's impossible to replace his personality and sort of what he brought. On the field, I think they'll be able to replace Suggs. He is definitely in the winding down. I think he had 1 sack in the second half of the season last year.
Right.
And I think they'll be able to replace him. But off the field, his leadership, that's a very fair question. And offensively, it's just all, I mean, they're very young, they're fast. It's a new crew over there. I mean, Lamar is a little bit of a leader, and players do look to him. Certainly for the real tone setter, it's Marshall Yanda. No question about it. The right guard, one of the best offensive linemen in the league, and just sets the right tone easily. I mean, he's just a grinding, crushing player that, doesn't take any guff from anyone. And, I mean, he's kind of low key. He doesn't get a ton of attention, I think, from the public and all that, even though he's a Pro Bowl player. But in the locker room, tremendous respect for him, and eyes look to him. And not a super voluble guy, but I think you're looking at a leader there.
You look at the offense and the way they're evolving around the league. A lot of teams are going for receivers or spreading the field out. Baltimore is obviously the inverse of that, where they're collecting every tight end that they can find off the shelf. And, they re-signed Nick Boyle. You have Mark Andrews, Hayden Hurst. How is that going to work? Are they really going to run 3 tight end sets? Are they going to rotate guys? And why did they bring back Nick Boyle? And give me an overview of where Andrews and Hurst were at their rookie years.
They like that a lot. I don't know about 3 tight end sets. I think you'll see a lot of 2 tight end sets for sure. Okay. They brought back Boyle because Boyle is basically the 6th offensive. It's a running offense, and Boyle is the 6th offensive lineman. He's a very, very strong blocker in that role, and basically just point him in the direction of and he just goes and hits people. And so they've always liked him, and it's actually a pretty easy decision to bring him back. He just meshes well with what the Ravens are trying to do with being physical and running the ball. Andrews and Hurst, they have a lot of hope for. Andrews, my prediction, he'll probably be the leading receiver on this team. Okay. He had a good rookie year. I think he led the rookies in receiving yards last year, and Lamar likes throwing to him. He's a matchup problem. He gets open, and I think that's just a real solid developing player there. Hayden Hurst is a question mark, first-round draft pick. He broken foot set him back last year. He's put on about 15, 20 pounds of muscle. He can definitely block. He's physical. They're hoping he can still be fast and get downfield and catch the ball. So that's a bit of an X factor there, but they have high hopes for him. I mean, he's a first-round draft pick. He's just in his 2nd year. So an interesting group there. They feel pretty good about those tight ends.
When you look at this year's draft class there, especially the first 4 players, 3 of them offensive players there. Marquis Brown, a lot of people already know a lot about him. He's still coming off that foot injury, though. Don't believe he's practiced yet. Probably. What are the prospects with him? Will he start off on active PUP for the Ravens, or do they expect him to come right out of the chute and start working there right at the start of training camp?
Well, you've hit on a big question, one that's circulating a lot on the talk shows here. People want to know what's up. I mean, first-round draft pick missed all OTAs and minicamp. I mean, he was here, and he slipped into a few drills. He was standing there. I mean, he's walking. He's okay. He's been rehabbing. He looks fine, but he is not cleared yet. And I think a lot of people feel that, if he's really going to be a factor this year, which is why they drafted him, he needs to be on that field pretty soon. And so that's one of the big question marks as training camp begins. What is his status? And there's just no telling. He's around the facility here on this dead period, so that's maybe a good sign. Or it could be a bad sign, I guess, that he's rehabbing. So I don't know. They're hopeful that he'll be ready. They've said he'll be ready, and, but it remains to be seen, and that's a big question mark.
The other 2 offensive players taken in the first 4 picks, Miles Boykin out of Notre Dame. Alex and I both studied him quite a bit there during the pre-draft process. We a guy that we think the Steelers had a pretty good level of interest in, and a guy that I really fell in love with by studying all that Oklahoma State tape the last couple of years, learning more about Mason Rudolph and James Washington. That's that Justice Hill, kind of a change of pace back there, kind of a home run hitter. A guy can even be in there maybe on some third downs to block. How have those two young players done during the offseason process, and how quickly can both of those guys get some role on the field in that offense?
Boykin it was set back a little bit. He had a hamstring injury and missed some practice time. So he was slow a little bit. He's certainly impressive physically. He'll be ready to go in training camp, and there are snaps there to be taken. They have high hopes for him. I mean, the Ravens have never done this, taking these, two receivers high like that. And the reason is they needed help at that position. That is an understatement of the year. So Boykin, though, was set back a little in practice. We'll see what happens there. Justice Hill he's an impressive young player. For all those reasons you said, a home run hitter. I think they envision him exactly as you mentioned. Third down, maybe get the ball in his hands, throw the ball to him. He's really fast. I think he was the fastest running back at the combine. I think he could easily be running back kicks for this team as well. Get the ball in his hands and see what happens. I mean, they have a lot of running backs on, more running backs than they need on this team. I mean, they went out and got Mark Ingram to sort of solidify things. And that Gus Edwards led the team last year in rushing, and he's just a straight-ahead, mauler. And Kenneth Dixon, who is a wild card for sure, finished this season, and he's had a lot of injuries and suspensions, and, they're really not sure they can count on him. But, boy, when he was on the field towards the end of last year, he was running very well. And Dixon's the one who'll be vulnerable, I think, with Justice Hill here, because he's going to make the team, and they're hopeful of finding a role for him because they just have not had that. Just a home run hitter out of the backfield. So they have high hopes for him.
John, did they make a mistake in letting John Brown get away?
I liked John Brown a lot. I don't know. I mean, what he signed 3 years, $27 million in Buffalo. The Ravens could have afforded that. John Brown completely disappeared from this offense once Lamar took over. There didn't seem to be he did drop. I mean, he was a good soldier, and he actually said after the season he wanted to come back. It didn't work out. I liked him a lot. That is a talented young man there. I felt that just watching him for a year on the practice field, it's impressive. But, I think whether it's a mistake is a good question. It depends on Hollywood Brown, I would say. They're hopeful that Brown is as fast as, that Hollywood Brown is as fast as John Brown and is a little less of a straight line speed too, a little more of a darting speed. And they're hopeful to get a little bit more of that. Brown was a little bit of a one-trick pony with that straight-ahead speed. So they're hopeful of getting maybe an accelerated version of him. Remains to be seen. So certainly a fair question. Brown, though, did disappear from this offense, so maybe they were right to think that it just wasn't the right fit.
To go back to the running back position briefly, John, you mentioned Gus Edwards. That was the guy I wanted to talk about. I think Steeler fans are mad that he's stolen the Bus nickname, so we're gonna have to copyright that or something because there's one Bus and his name is Jerome Bettis, not Gus Edwards. But is he going to be the guy in 2019? Do you view last year as a flash in the pan where they just didn't have a guy to be that lead back? And they brought in Ingram, they draft Hill. I mean, what are Edwards' prospects for 2019?
I'm interested to see how this works out. Mm-hmm. Honestly, Edwards had the job. He had a great year. I think he had 1 or 0 rushes for negative yards. Just a straight ahead guy. And I think they wanted more versatility there. Plus, they're going to run the ball. So Gus wore down. I mean, he became the starter really week 9. By week 16, the playoffs, he was pretty beat up, pretty exhausted. There's a lot of carries. So clearly, they needed more bodies, more people that could handle that load. So that's what it is. Gus will be part of that load this year. He did show a lot last year in terms of the ability to pick up tough yardage inside. And so he'll have a role. But there is, it's interesting. He was a starter, a surprise. I don't know that he was a flash in the pan watching him. I mean, he was just a straight ahead, hard hitting guy. But then they bring in a guy ahead of him at his position, a veteran guy, pretty accomplished. So how they apportion those snaps between those two, I'm not sure. And Gus is an undrafted rookie, a year ago, so he didn't have a big head at all. And he's saying all the right things. It's, I still have to make this team and all that stuff. So we'll see. But he's lost about 10 pounds, changed his body a little bit. He wants to be more of a factor in the passing game. And that was evident on the practice field in spring practices. He was more of a factor. So I think he's trying to become more versatile. So he is definitely working on making himself valuable. So remains to be seen how those snaps are apportioned, but they'll both be on the field.
Yep, and Steeler fans know that script well. James Conner came in year 2, lost some weight, and became a more versatile player, so I could see that definitely play out again in Baltimore. I know it's probably tough to gauge, John, especially right now here in July, but do these Ravens players, do you think there's a chip on their shoulder? Because, AFC North race, people talk about it, especially nationally. The Browns have the headlines because they're relevant again. The Steelers have had the drama at times, and the Ravens don't seem to be receiving any attention despite they won the North last year. Do you feel like they kind of feel that disrespect and that might be used as a motivating factor?
Maybe a little bit. I think more the Browns than the Steelers. The Ravens and the Steelers, it's always sort of the status quo there. They'll have some great games. It'll be all that. The Browns certainly are the one that have changed the dynamic. And, I have to admit, I'm amazed when I look at some of those gambling lines out of Vegas and they're like the 5th choice to win the Super Bowl. It's like, are you kidding?
John, are you drinking that Kool-Aid or no?
No,
I'm not either. I'm not either. I think Baker Mayfield's a great young player. I think he had a great rookie season, and look, they added a lot of pieces. But man, let's see this kid do it a couple years. I mean, they're all over him, and the Browns.
Well, I guess I'm old school, but I've actually written this on the Ravens website. I said, the Steelers, there's a lot of subtractions there for sure. It's also, and I'm not just, this is what I wrote. I'm not saying it because I'm on the podcast here. I'm saying, Steeler organization, pretty good at figuring out how to put a winning team on the field. And I think they'll do it again. And, Ben's still there. And I think that's a winning team. That's a contender right there. The Ravens, I think they've won the North last year. They got a lot of pieces. I think they'll be a contender. Not easy to beat. I think the Browns, let's see. I agree with you. Mayfield's excellent. He's really like a shorter version, younger. He could be another Ben in a lot of respects. Big arm, gambling player. I really like him. But let's see whether all those pieces come together. Got a first-time coach. There's a lot of question marks. And I will believe it when I see it. I'll put it like that.
Outside of the fumbles and all last year that Lamar Jackson had, did you see enough progression? What kind of progression did you see in him as a passer? And I think obviously with those young receivers in, it's going to be tough, especially when Marquis Brown missing all that time. People just don't realize how big it is for a rookie player to miss all that time that he missed, especially to go along with another young quarterback in Lamar Jackson. But my question really is, what did you see out of Lamar Jackson last year, and did you see enough?
You talking about in practices and stuff, second year?
I'm talking about what did you see out of him really last year during his rookie season? What was there? Were you impressed enough with his progression throughout the season, and then carry that on over into the offseason?
Well, certainly his rookie season. Yeah, there were some mistakes and everything, but he dropped the ball too much. He missed too many easy passes. There were plenty of things to point to, very clear things, and he would be the first one to point to them. But he's also, there's just not many players like him in the league, and the Ravens have hitched their wagon to him. He's unbelievably fast and unpredictable and made things happen, and they won with him. They went 6-1.
Sure did.
And made the playoffs.
Sure did.
And, he's a dynamic player, and the other players like him, and he's a leader, and so they've hitched their wagon to him. And what everybody wants to see second year is, number one, hold on to the football better, and number two, he's never going to be Joe Flacco as a passer. He just is never going to be that. Flacco threw, and still does, throws one of the most beautiful balls. He's just a natural, and always was. Lamar, that's not his biggest strength. What they want him to do, though, is get his mechanics down to the point where the best way I can put it is hit the layups. There's a lot of short, easy passes that he was missing last year. They wanted to hit those this year, second year. And, his tight ends and his running backs, they get open, throw it to them. Don't throw it in the ground. And so that's what they're hoping to see. He's been working on his mechanics a lot. There was improvement on the practice field. It's not perfect by any means. He's probably put on 10. He's been in the weight program, 10 to 15, 10 pounds, I'd say. So he looks different physically. So he's growing. And they're just hoping to see, first and foremost, hold on to the football more. We'll see how that goes. They're not that worried about him getting hurt. This whole thing about a running quarterback, it's changed in the NFL. You can't hit the quarterback. It's not easily. And if he goes down, it's very hard to hit. You'll get flagged, and it's very interesting how that has evolved. That they're not that worried about Lamar being a running quarterback and getting hurt. They feel like if they can coach him to the point where he'll go down at the right times and won't get hurt. But they do want to see him hold on to the ball more, pass, hit those layups, as I said, and they're optimistic that they can see that in his second season. So he's a developing player still. That's definitely something to remember when judging where the Ravens will go this year. Lamar is still developing.
All right, how bullish are you on the Ravens this year? Is this a team that can definitely win 10 games? Is it a 9-win team? What's your feel of this team? Obviously, a lot of things can change between now and the start of the season, so we'll only hold you to your prediction if you're wrong.
Well, I'm sure to be wrong. Are you kidding? But no, I'm fairly bullish on it. I think after years of sort of predictable offense, it's great. The fans here are excited to see get these guys out there, these guys with speed and quickness, just unbelievable speed and quickness, and see if they can make something go. So I think they can. The defense, it's a lot of subtraction. They're going to miss some guys. I do think they got a real strong defensive coordinator and very strong secondary. I think they'll be okay on that side of the ball. Maybe not number 2 in the league or whatever it was, but I don't know if they're going to be losing games on defense. So I think that's pretty strong side of the ball still, and offensively there should be an uptick there, and so I'm pretty bullish. I think it's a 10-win team. I think that's entirely possible.
Do you think they'll win the division?
Well, I think it's quite possible. I think it always comes down to those Baltimore-Pittsburgh games and Cleveland. Even though I'm not a buyer yet, and it's certainly going to be tough. But the Ravens have been losing to Cleveland anyway, so they've lost a game a year lately. So, I think they can. Let me put it this way: they're maybe being undersold a little bit as a contender, as the defending champions. I think they can definitely. Those games are going to be the division games are going to be great this year. I think that it's pretty evenly matched. I think people are sleeping on the Bengals a little bit, to be honest. I like what they're doing. I actually like what they're doing. They're going to run the ball, and they've got a strong offensive line, and new coaching staff. I think they might be pretty tough. I think it's going to be a very interesting year in the division.
Well, first game between Ravens and the Steelers is Week 5. That one's in Pittsburgh, and then we have a long wait until the second one. They close out the 2019 season against each other, but we'll be sure to catch up with you again, John. Ahead of that Week 5 game against Ravens Steelers. There, we appreciate you having you on, Alex and I. We always look forward. So do our listeners to having you on. You've been probably one of the longest, I think, the longest contributor. Over the years on a Terrible Podcast. We certainly do appreciate your time. And one last time, tell the readers what they can find in your latest book, The League.
My latest book, The League, is really the creation story of the NFL. Art Rooney Sr., first, is one of the major figures in this book. It focuses on the owners, Rooney and his colleagues, who sort of took the league by the collar and dragged it through those first decades when it was actually a failing league and nobody was failing more than the Steelers. How did they do that? How did they keep the league from going under and set it up to succeed? Rooney's in there, and really enjoyed investigating that Pittsburgh football history. And it's The League, and it can be bought on Amazon, can be bought anywhere. And it is there, a good read for football season.
Well, John, once again, we appreciate having you on the Terrible Podcast. Once again, we look forward to talking to you right after the first quarter mark of the 2019 season. Thanks again for coming on today.
Thanks, John.
My pleasure. Thanks as always.
All right, Alex, good buddy John Eisenberg. Always a treat to have John on. And once again, it seems like we've known him for or at least me, known him forever. He's been on the show several times. He does great job with his books and all, as we talked about at the top of the show as well. So thanks to John for coming on. Boy, I kind of got mixed feelings with him. Starting talking about the defense, question marks about them, and get into the offense, question marks about him. But then he turns around, and he has the Ravens. He likes their chances of winning the AFC North.
Yeah, and I can't blame him for it. It's funny. You got three cities in the AFC North all saying that their team's going to be the one that'll win it: Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cleveland. And all three, I think, have convincing cases to be made.
Obviously, all three of them can't win it. I'm less bullish. I think I'm less. I don't know. Where are you on the Browns right now?
I mean, I'm not at the far end of things saying that, yes, they're going to do it. I think there are certainly a lot of question marks. I'm concerned about the offensive line or the lack of talent. I think it's a weakness on the team right now. But if they win it, it's not going to shock me. I think Cleveland's a good team. They're going to be competitive. They're going to make it a really tough race. So I guess I'm somewhere in the middle, but I think I'm higher on them than you might be.
On the Browns?
Yeah, because I think you're still skeptical of Baker a little bit, and I'm honestly not.
Yeah, I'm look, I mean, and that defense as well too. I mean, Greg, out goes Greg Williams, and obviously, kind of first year really head coach in Freddie, even though he kind of took over last year there, and Baker in his second year. I like to see these rookie quarterbacks prove it to me again. So I'm not as bullish. I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid like everybody else is on the Browns. And I've said it time and time again, man, about the Ravens. I don't see how that Ravens defense does not take a step backwards this year.
Sure.
And on top of that, Lamar Jackson, I'm going to make Lamar Jackson throw the football. I'm going to make him we saw what Gus and Lamar Jackson were able to do on the ground and the things that they were able to do last year with those two. They're not going to beat me that way. They're not going to grind out 200 yards on the ground against me. I'm going to make Lamar Jackson beat me and make some key throws in the game. Yep. I'm not convinced he can do it. I got to be honest with you. I think I said this last year. I think the Ravens kind of did outperform what I had them doing last year. I see them as a 500 or less team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm more skeptical of the Ravens than maybe even Cleveland. But I know Baltimore's always a well-coached team, and just like Pittsburgh, they always find a way to be in the mix. I'm just saying, and you can agree, and you can pick whoever you want as your winner, and that's fine. And Pittsburgh obviously is going to be right in the mix and right up there with the other two teams, is that all three teams can make a case, I believe, that they can be the ones to win the AFC North, or at least that's what the fan bases are telling themselves right now. In Cincinnati, I don't think there's really many people saying that they're going to win the North, but everywhere else, they're saying, if this thing shakes right, then we can do it.
I'll tell you this, if both the Browns and the Ravens win 9 or more games, the Steelers aren't going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, probably not. But they're all going to be competitive. Those are all going to be close games. Pittsburgh, Baltimore's always close. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, they're going to be close games, right? You agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I still think the Steelers can win both of them.
Sure.
Obviously, here's the thing. I mean, not all three of those teams are going to go over 500 this year. I don't think.
What's the history on that? There have been situations where you've had that happen. No. Yeah, Baltimore, Cincy, and Pittsburgh a couple years ago.
I just don't see it happening.
No.
I just don't see it happening. One, maybe even two of those teams are going to be 500 or worse.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
mark me down. Write it down.
You're gonna have a 9-7. You might have an 11-5, 10-6, 9-7 kind of situation. What happened? I thought there was a couple of years ago when the Bengals were good, where they what were the standings? I want to try to find that. But they're all gonna be tough outs, and these are gonna be close games, and that's just the point I'm trying to make, is that these things are always gonna be close, and when you have a close game, who knows how it's gonna turn out? Yeah, 2014. Pittsburgh 11-5, Cincy 10-5-1, Baltimore 10-6. Cleveland was actually 7-9. So I know the odds of that probably aren't high, but it has happened before and happened in recent history.
Well, okay, true or false? A team in the AFC North will win more than 10 games.
I'll say true, but it'll be no more than 11. So there'll be an 11-5 team.
I'm gonna go false. Who do you think that 11-5 team is gonna be?
I don't know.
You obviously don't think it's the Steelers, I don't think.
No, I haven't said that. I mean, the Steelers can win the AFC North. I don't want to say that at all. I'm just saying that all these teams are going to be competitive, and they all have cases to be made that they're the team that can win the AFC North, and you're going to have close games. You're going to play a lot of AFC North ball over the last 6 weeks of the season. So, I'm not in the business of making predictions right now in July. I'll make a somewhat prediction that'll probably be wrong right before the season starts. But in July, when you got camp and everything to go through, injuries that can happen, I'm not even going to try.
Sure. I mean, look, obviously a lot of things can change over the course of the next, during training camp.
Yeah.
I just, where I am right now, I don't think a team wins more than 10 games in the AFC North, and I would not be surprised if I think two teams will definitely be 500 or less.
Okay. I'd be more willing to agree that no team wins more than 10 games. I think you'll have at least two teams that'll be above 500.
All right. Once again, thanks to John Eisenberg. You can follow John on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. Make sure you get on there and thank him once again for coming on the Terrible Podcast for us.
Absolutely, and buy his book, The League, which I'm going to pick up myself because I'm really interested in that early history stuff. Dave, if we get to read emails, I want to go through the defensive line. That'll be our position group today, and we'll kind of go through it relatively quickly because I know we're running a little bit long on the show. The starters, I think, are pretty much entrenched. The only things that are really, I think, of topic and of note right now is, a Haywood potential restructure, which is just not going to matter a whole lot to the average fan, and then a Hargrave extension, which we're hoping for, but certainly uncertain of. Stephon Tuitt, though, is somebody that you're looking to take that next step, finish some of those plays, and try to have a career year in sacks.
Yeah, no issue with the starters whatsoever. In fact, I think, who was it? Moving the chains, moving the
Daniel Jeremiah.
Yeah, Jeremiah listed the Steelers' combination offensive defensive line. What was it, the second or third best in the NFL, combining those two together? Mm-hmm. And it's hard to disagree with that, because already if you're going to have the Steelers offensive line ranked in the top 5, I think you got to rank the Steelers defensive line, top 5, right?
Yeah, I don't have an exact ranking because I'd have to look at the rest of the league, but I think top 5 is more than fair.
So obviously with those starters, and you hit on it there, look, Cameron Hayward's Cameron Hayward. I mean, this is a guy that could have could have 10 sacks. We did that sack breakdown. You suggest that maybe this team could have 60 sacks. Mm-hmm. I think here, and Hargrave, if he gets enough playing time, he can have 5 or 6.
Yeah, he had 6.5 last year.
Maybe even more than that. And I think with Tuitt, if Tuitt could just stay fully healthy this whole year and finish some of those plays. And behind Tyson Alulu, look, I mean, Tyson Alulu is what he is. He's a backup, but he's a guy that's what you're going to get out of him, especially against the run there. And beyond that, we'll see who wins. Is Daniel McCullers going to make this team? If he does, you still wouldn't expect him to play that many snaps. And then Isaiah Buggs, is that guy going to be your number 6? And hopefully you don't have to rely on guys like him, Alulu, and who am I missing there?
Big Dan.
Yeah, Big Dan for many snaps. If you can have your main 3 be the predominant guys in there, I don't think there's no reason to worry with that unit.
Agreed. And you feel like you have your top six, and they always keep six locked in. McCullers and Bugs being 5 and 6, Alulu number 4, then your three starters. I mean, that could change with an injury. If there's anybody else you had to talk about beyond the top six, is there anyone that catches your eye, at least to the degree of that guy might be a little interesting? Is there a name that pops out to you?
Yeah, I think Casey Sales is a guy to be fun to watch during the preseason. What about you?
Honestly, I was having trouble finding a name. Maybe that Henry Mondo guy, who's got a kind of a good build. He was in, I think, Saints camp, but I don't know much about him. You got Winston Craig from the AAF. Greg Gilmore was brought back after being a UDFA last year. Was a tryout in rookie minicamp this year and made the team again. But it's hard to find that name. You're trying, and those reps are so tough to come by, especially if you're a third string guy. I mean, you're getting 4 or 5 snaps in a practice. I mean, it's just limited. So those guys really have to do something, and generally do something early to try to make a move.
Those three starters, talking about obviously Hargrave, Hayward, and Tuitt. I don't need to see much out of them in the preseason, to be honest with you. Just get them through that obviously health. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of work to do there, other than you probably might want to get them playing in front of Bush. For a few snaps there, depending on if you intend on him being the starter there. But, I mean, either people are in their position or not, kind of thing. And obviously there's enough practice during training camp to go along with that. But, boy, just if those three guys can continue on with their health, I really like the overall makeup of that group, top to bottom. And I'm probably a little bit more bullish on Bugs than most. And if he can keep that motor going and show that he can run after the football, maybe you can get him a few more snaps during his rookie season, from the halfway point on.
Yeah, maybe. I'd be curious exactly where they want to play him. Do they see him as a 5-tech or as a 4-eye? The length isn't great, but he's played it before. They kind of seem to hint that they see him as an end, but probably someone that you can move around, move to the 3, maybe even to the 1. We'll see with him. 2 other quick notes. Cam Hayward, 5 sacks away from 50 in his career, become the 7th Steeler to do that, so a chance to set a milestone this year. And I don't want to forget about my man Levon Hooks, who's been around this team for a long, long time, but this might be the last go-around for Levon Hooks, unfortunately.
Yeah, and he flashed last year a little bit during the preseason as well.
Yeah, even I think two years ago, I want to say I wrote about him having a really good third preseason game. He kind of seemed to move up the depth chart, but he's always been someone that can, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, unfortunately, for Levon Hooks.
And I don't know how much eligibility, if he has any. I think he might have.
It's so confusing with these practice
I'll have to go through all that and all. But, that's a good rundown of that group. And needless to say, you and I aren't overly concerned about that group.
No, barring any sort of major injury. I'm just fingers crossed for the Hargrave extension. That's the big thing I'm looking at.
And we'll know sooner rather than later on that.
Yes, we will. All right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails here to close out the show.
Let's see. Hey, Dave and Alex, love the show. This is from Richard. Seriously, get a new car. Alex, get a new car. Hitchhiking is not okay in 2019. Am I the only one that thinks the assumption that Juju is, I don't know what that word is, best in the slot has to be taken with a grain of salt? That Juju is best in the slot has to be taken. No, I think Juju is very good in the slot. We're not saying that that's all he's going to play, but if you're going to play, if you're going to play a lot of 11 personnel, who are you going to put in the slot?
Yeah, when I say he's best in the slot, I mean himself, not compared to anyone else. I mean, I think, is he better than, because maybe the way that quit's being interpreted is that, well, he's better than Ryan Switzer or Eli Rogers in the slot, which, yes, obviously he is, but I'm not trying to say that's the best thing for the team. I think that's the best thing for him. That's where he functions the best. What he did in college, what he did primarily his rookie year, it's what he did for the first half of last year before he played more of the Z spot when Washington struggled. I mean, he can play on the outside, and he will play on the outside, but just based off his football IQ, his toughness, the chemistry needed in the slot, and that he has with Ben, all those factors make him better in the slot than the Z. I'm not trying to compare Juju to anyone on the roster. I'm just looking at himself and the way he works with Ben, and the slot is his home.
Absolutely. He works good as a run blocker.
Yeah, that helps too.
Close to the line of scrimmage as well too. So yeah, barring any surprises, the majority of Juju's snaps in 2019 are going to come in the slot. And look, are there going to be some 11 personnel situations where Juju's on the outside? Yes, there is, but it's not going to be the majority. So I think the assumption that Juju is best in the slot is a correct assumption there.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Number one, Pittsburgh requires every receiver, and I guess he's running down the list here. Pittsburgh requires every receiver to know every position because they move around a lot. They do, but probably not as much as you think. His win rate on the inside and outside are almost identical. Look, here's the thing, too. We're going to have to see Juju be able to show more of catching the football down the field, more than 15 yards past the line of scrimmage a little bit more with AB gone. So that's something that we haven't really seen out of him yet. So to say that his win rate on the inside and outside are almost identical, let's hold off on that right now until we see more.
Well, I don't know. I assume he's getting that from somewhere, the PFF kind of stat. I'm assuming.
Yeah, but I mean, most of those are probably too in not in 11 personnel.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the context.
Understandably, his body type and play style may lend itself to that position, but in his first 2 years, he has done nothing but excel more and more in all routes there. I mean, look, he's still developing wide receiver, sure. So I don't. Side note: his double team rate wasn't as low or unsuccessful as people think. Deion Sanders even mentioned it. The most teams seem to be running what they called in his day double and try to force a third to beat them, which they didn't have. One came down to Vance or Connor there. I think you're reading a little bit way too much into this, Richard, to be honest with you. He's going to play predominantly in the slot in 11 personnel. Going to make him a little bit harder to double, I think, in some instances. You can move him around, too. Nobody is saying that he can't, but I think when push comes to shove, we're not just saying he's best in the slot because he's best in the slot. That's where in this offense he best fits.
Especially because you want James Washington as your outside Z receiver.
I don't understand the narrative he's trying to bust there. Do you?
Not quite. I mean, to be clear, Juju's going to play on the outside. In two receiver sets, it's going to be your outside Z receiver. He's improved as an outside receiver. I think he's shown a lot of strides there, his ability to create separation, but I just think he's been a better slot receiver, both himself and then what, as you mentioned, Dave, what fits best for the team is Juju to play in the slot. That chemistry in the slot is really important, and Ben has great chemistry with Juju, and that's where I think you want the magic to happen. And
he's not as twitchy. I don't think I don't want to see a lot of him in the X.
Yeah, he's not. He's the one. I mean, he can play X. I mean, again, I get the point. They move guys around, but he's not played there really at all. He played maybe 10, 15 snaps, and that's not where he functions best.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't think you're going to see a lot of him in the X just because he's not super twitchy guy like that. And second, as far he's not a stretch to field Z type guy, traditional. I mean, he can obviously get over the top and stack some guys, but I mean, just overall, and I think that's, Richard, why you hear so many people talk about him in the slot, because really that's where his best fit is in this offense. Not saying that he can't play the other spots, but that's where his best fit is there. So thanks for that question. Kaylin Clark writes in, before the draft and free agency, I'd asked two questions. Who is more likely to improve between Terrell Edmunds and James Washington, and which player's improvement is more important to the respective sides of the ball? To which Alex responded with James Washington for both questions. Considering the additions at wide receiver and the lack of addition at safety, is James Washington's improvement and development more important to the Steelers in 2019 than Terrell Edmunds? Separate question. Is it more important for Edmunds to improve or for him to stay healthy considering lack of depth? Thanks for all this great Steelers content. Boy, a lot to package up there. Look, I mean, you obviously want a guy to stay healthy. I mean, plain and simple. And yes, the Steelers' depth at the safety position is not great, once again. We've talked a lot about James Washington being the X factor, though, man. And I'm not going to get away from that.
Yeah, I mean, we all know how critical he is. I believe you whenever you say that I said Washington both those questions, but I remember there also being a question where I played devil's advocate and I said Edmunds is more important to his development because of the lack of depth at safety. I remember specifically me saying that at some point along the way over these last couple of months. So point taken, because you're right. if Edmonds struggles, you have a lot less options to solve that problem than you do if Washington struggles. So point taken on that point.
All right, one last one from Bryce. This is Bryce, only 3 weeks away from camp. I can't wait. A couple questions for Jens. I agree with the general sentiment that Hargrave should be extended ASAP. Why do you believe this coaching staff has failed to get him more snaps and put him in more one-on-one situations with a weaker O-line to get him after the quarterback? He clearly has shown that he deserves to play more in sub-package situations, and because they are in sub-package as so much, it doesn't seem like they would take too many snaps opportunities for Tuitt and Hayward. Your thoughts? As it stands right now, I'd like to know how both of you rank the corner tandems in the AFC North, Hayden and Steven Nelson versus everyone else in the division. Look, I mean, you're going to get Hargrave on the field as much as you can, but in sub-package, depending on, what are you going to give up?
Yeah, it's just tough to do. I mean, when you're a 3-4 team and you have these two guys in Tuitt and Hayward, you're paying so much and have played well. There's only so many snaps to go around. But again, Hargrave had 6.5 sacks last year. He got a lot of one-on-one opportunities, so I don't want to pretend like this team isn't trying to find ways to get him on the field. They are. It's just tough to do. There's a cap. You can't play this guy 80% of the times because you can't play all three of them that much unless you just never want to run sub-package football, and that's not the era we live in right now. So it's a fine line to walk, and if these guys stay healthy, it's just there's going to be a natural cap to how many snaps you can give Hargrave.
Might you see him a little bit more in sub-package this year based on what? I mean, look, him and Hayward were real good together last season, especially when and look, if you can get Hargrave over a guard, yes, please.
Over a center, especially, he dominates those centers one-on-one. Size and speed.
He is a guy that, and judging by his off-season videos and all like that, he looks like he's raring to go again. But as Alex said, there's only so many snaps to go around, with those three guys. And will they play him a little bit more? We'll see. But if they do, it probably won't be a huge tick up in the snap department. Okay, rank the corner tandems in the AFC North. Wow.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with that. I think Baltimore's still probably one with Humphrey and Jimmy Smith. I mean, I like Greedy Williams, but that's been unproven. So Denzel Ward, it's hard to put that number 2. Cincinnati, I don't know. Baltimore's one.
Trey and William Jackson's not bad, right?
Yeah. And they've played. So for right now, I mean, I like Steven Nelson. It was a good acquisition, but I'll go, because we haven't seen him play yet, I'll go Baltimore 1, Cincy 2, Pittsburgh 3, Cleveland 4.
I would go the same, and it'd be close between Cleveland and the Steelers for that number 3 spot, I think.
Even with Greedy being unproven? Because I assume that's the opposite corner.
Yeah.
We're referring to.
Yeah.
I like Denzel Ward a lot. He had a fantastic rookie season. Pittsburgh found that out week 1, but it is an unknown.
And here's the thing with Steven Nelson. We're going to learn a lot about him real quick.
Yeah, I think for me, Cleveland, is clearly 4 right now, and I think Cincy and Pittsburgh are pretty debatable, but I think Baltimore's pretty entrenched as number 1.
I would go Baltimore number 1, and because of the experience in William Jackson in Cincinnati, I'd go number 2, and then, I'd go Pittsburgh 3, and then Cleveland 4.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, thanks for everybody's question. We probably ran real long today, didn't we? But at least we had some good topics, I think, and hopefully people learned a lot along with us in this show. We'll talk about aggressive passing rates. We wanted to get to that today, but we'll try to get to that on the Tuesday show as well too. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex Kozora on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Hey, it's donation time. The season started. How about supporting the show a little bit for us here? You can go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button, upper right navigational bar, and also if you want to support the site, SteelersDepot.com, and want an ad-free version of the site, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit ad-free, upper right navigational bar. What are you playing, the flute there?
I got a phone call. Sorry.
All right. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.